brain difference is not a crime.
Mental health isn't just your problem.
It's our problem.
And now, Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Welcome to Mental Health Mondays.
I'm Marla.
And I'm Dave. And we are so excited about our guest today. Man, you guys are in for a massive treat. But before we tell you about our guest, I want to remind you to stop by loveandbeyondreason.org or NAMI San Fernando Valley's homepage. Click on the Mental Health Mondays tab and support Mental Health Mondays. We want to keep bringing you interesting and educational and informative shows every week. Oh, man, but I told you that you're in store for a treat. In the world of music, the incomparable Lalah Hathaway is a five-time Grammy winner and an 11-time nominee, and the daughter of the legendary and beloved vocalist Donny Hathaway. At the tender age of 10, she lost her father to mental illness, and today she speaks about breaking the silence and erasing the stigma surrounding mental illness, or brain difference as we like to refer to it. When we come back, our guest will be Lalah Hathaway, the voice.
Help someone who is struggling by supporting the National Alliance on Mental Illness and be a part of the NAMI effect. Hope starts with you.
Hey guys, listen up. Learn something.
All right, we're back.
I have to admit that I'm a little I'm giddy, but I'm excited, but I actually miss my friend. So Lay's here on Zoom. Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. We really appreciate you being here.
Hi.
Hey, girl.
How are ya?
Good.
So you guys, we have to let you in on a little secret. Layla's one of our great friends. We've been friends for a long time. Matter of fact, we have to apologize to Lalah, like we always do in moments like these, for Marla actually breaking her ankle, which was really the beginning of our friendship.
I'm gonna have to go to therapy because I decided that I have worked a very long time to put this in the back
Behind you, right? Put it behind you.
Yeah, and you know, every time I see you on stage barefoot, I feel responsible.
Quickly tell the story, Marla. Quickly tell the story.
The story is that in the very beginning of our relationship, Lalah was in the studio collaborating with Take Six, and they were doing Someday They'll All Be Free. Lalah said, "Oh, what are you guys going to do later?" And Dave's like, "Oh, my wife loves to play tennis." Layla's like, "Oh, I used to play tennis in high school." And they came out. She was like, "Do you mind?" And I would love to come. Dave's like, "The more the merrier." We're completely open. She comes out, first ball hit, up in the air, Lalah goes, down she comes and takes a slow, crumbling fall.
It was the slowest fall down ever
in the history of man. It literally felt like she was suspended. And Dave, then she
wasn't even panicking. She was like, "Ow, ooh, ah."
Oh,
and then she just went nice and calm. So we were like, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's not that bad."
And she's like, "No,
you'll be okay."
But this is Lalah. She said, "No, I think my ankle's broken." And Dave was like, "Your ankle can't be broken because if it was, you'd be sweating.
You'd be a cold sweat."
And then.
Well, also, you'd be nauseous.
At least you don't feel nauseous.
But anyway, it was obviously, sorry, Lalah, you had to be at the end of pain. But it was God's design for us to, from that point on, you were staying in our house for like 2 or 3 days.
Pretty much kidnapped her for the week.
It was a friendship made in heaven, and our family. Lalah has been with us through pretty much everything. I think when we met Lalah, Lexi may have been 6. And now she's 28.
I was sleeping on Lexi's trundle, remember?
So anyway, it's one of the things that I find to be pretty amazing in the tapestry of life. When we met you and became very close friends, we had no idea that we would be on the journey that we ended up on with mental health.
Yeah.
But in our friendship, we've always had open conversations.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we talked about was the unfortunate incident of what happened with your father. And I think I want to start by just kind of talking about that just a little bit, and from the position, from 2 different angles. One, the stigma and the silence that we almost seem honor bound to keep, more so in our community as African Americans. and then the whole world kind of watching,
Mm-hmm.
and then you being a child,
The celebrity factor.
before you even could plug into what it really meant about what his diagnosis was and what he went through and his struggle.
Yeah.
That was very private, based on his persona that is literally the legendary anchor of music in our community,
For
or period,
R&B,
in the
yeah.
world,
Yeah.
world. Let me say that. So that's so the first question I really have for you is, what is your recollection of?
I got to tell you that I'm learning through, therapy and time, that a lot of my memory is gone. I have very little memory of that time, and a lot of that is trauma based. A lot of that happened to protect me from whatever is going on at that moment. What's interesting is I really appreciate that we think of it as a brain difference. It's just a difference in the chemical or how the synapses fire, because mental illness has so much stigma around it, particularly for people of color. And it's so baked in that we don't even really recognize that.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, in a lot of families, you have an uncle that's always an addict.
Right.
You got an uncle that never comes out of his room. I had a grandfather who never came out of his room. He walked to go to do his doctor's appointments, and he walked to church. He walked to mass on Sundays. Wow. So nothing
was that on
ever
your mom?
discussed.
Was that on what?
That's my father's father.
Okay, wow.
So nothing was ever discussed about it. No one ever said, "Well, why doesn't Pop go outside?"
Right.
There was no.
You just accepted that as what is.
Yeah, it is what it is, and I think a lot of us had those people in our families that there was something different, but we couldn't figure out what that difference was, and it wasn't talked about. And even though no one told you don't talk about it, you knew that, well, that's just what that is, and we don't talk about it.
Yeah, I have family members as well who literally, I've known them all my life. I didn't realize that the relationship that I was told that they had to the family was completely different than the reality of it. In other words, considered a sister, but in reality, it's a friend of a cousin, but just raised in the family because of a mental health issue that no one said anything about, and this person is just now living in this family. So and a lot of that kind of stuff used to happen, especially back in the day, for families of color, and I think that is a thing where, again, we just haven't really addressed it in the same way. For instance, when you said a drug addict, you have an uncle or family member that's a drug addict, that's actually a mental illness as well. We understand that now. Those are things that we deal with, but that's not the way that we dealt with it.
Right. For sure.
And a lot of people still don't deal with it like that. And until we get to a point in the world where, in the same way that you say, this girl has a broken ankle, she'll be sleeping on the trundle. you need to say this person has a different sense of self or a brain difference, and we need to treat them like they have an illness that we need to tend to. We may not be able to cure it, but we need to help them manage it, and that means that it's out in the open.
Well, I have a question for you, Lay. Did your dad have an actual diagnosis?
My father's actual diagnosis was paranoid schizophrenia. And as I get older, even with that, I have questions because, in a huge way, I was not there as an adult. So when I look around me now, I know a lot of musicians, and I know a lot of guys and girls, mostly guys, that I would look at and say, you might
be suffering.
Need a diagnosis. You might be going through something. You might have something that we need to talk about, and you might have many aces.
You might need some help.
You might need a little help.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times, it's a hard one for me because I wasn't there to see what that was. I know that there have been days in my life where I felt like, they're coming to get me for sure. They're going to come get me and put me in a coat like Diana Ross in Lady Sings the Blues, and I'm going to be in a round room looking for a corner. There are those days, and we all have those days.
Yeah.
So for me, mental illness is such a spectrum.
Correct.
It is.
It absolutely
really,
is.
really hard to pinpoint all the time what that is.
Even within the diagnosis, for sure.
Even within the diagnosis.
So
absolutely.
we'll be right back. We have more with Lalah Hathaway in a minute. Don't move.
When Dave and Marla get together, it's hot.
You may not realize it, but these words, often used to describe someone with a mental health condition, can be very harmful. In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation. Just because someone's struggle isn't obvious on the outside doesn't mean they aren't hurting on the inside. We need to see the person, not the condition. Join with me, pledge to be stigma-free.
It's time for the Mental Health Minute with Marla and Dave.
We continue this week with the key findings of the mental health state of America according to the annual report released by mentalhealthamerica.gov. Here's what the data shows.
There is still an unmet need for mental health treatment among youth and adults. 60% of youth with major depression did not receive any mental health treatment in 2017 and 18. Even in states with the greatest access, over 38% are not receiving the mental health services that they need. The percentage of adults with a mental health illness who are uninsured increased for the first time since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Nationally, 10.8% are uninsured, totaling 5.1 million adults.
This year's report includes a spotlight on the impact of COVID-19 on mental health. Here are the facts. The number of people looking for help with anxiety and depression has skyrocketed. From January to September in 2020, 315,220 people took the anxiety screen, a 93% increase over the 2019 total number of anxiety screens. 534,784 people took the depression screen, a 62% increase over the 2019 total number of depression screens. The number of people screening with moderate to severe symptoms of depression and anxiety has continued to increase throughout 2020 and remains higher than rates prior to COVID-19. Over 8 in 10 people who took a depression screen have scored with symptoms of moderate to severe depression consistently since the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020.
Throughout the month, we'll continue to bring you the results of the report. This message is brought to you by Mental Health Mondays in conjunction with Loving Beyond Reason and NAMI San Fernando Valley.
David is a thinker.
I never do anything without thinking about it first.
Marla is a feeler.
I basically wear my personality on my sleeve.
But when Marla and Dave get together, it's
Can
like
you
a
guys see my
match
emails
dancing
that
with a
people
firefighter.
can't hear? Is it me?
She's saying people can't.
I think we have a little technical issue before we get back to the show. We'll have our producer actually jump on that and get right on that for us. But I have a question. As we were talking about, you gave us the formal diagnosis that your dad had. And I know a lot of times when I was growing up, if my dad was going through some issues, he was a little too angry to he was dealing with paying bills, so that would kind of get on his nerves from time to time. My mom would kind of hide the impact of that from us. And so, he'd be in the back and she'd come out every now and then, everything's fine, but you hear stuff going on in the back that makes you think, well, it's not fine, but okay. Was that the similar kind of thing happening in your household? Did your mom kind of protect you from some of those things, or and I know you said that you have a hard time remembering that time period.
I can tell you that. I mean, you know my mother very well.
Mm-hmm.
She did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, she did.
She's a phenomenal person.
Yeah, of making everything as normal, as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We were raised with our family. We had Christmas and homecomings and summer vacations and spring breaks. Within within a household that has trauma, which is just about every single household,
Exactly.
there's a fair amount of it that rubs off on the children. You know what I mean? And there has to be some trauma to deal with some trauma.
Yeah.
So I can say that I really feel like my mom did what she knew how to do. She made it really normal for us, as normal as she could. She did not grow up in a household where there was any like apparent mental illness. So I know that for her as a like a 23, 25, 30-year-old woman in this situation, that it was something, something that she didn't understand how to deal with. And she really tried to educate herself on how to deal with it. And one of the things that she always talks about is the fact that it's really hard to get help for people. And
I can imagine even back then it had to be much harder.
Impossible.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah. That's one of the things that she talks about a lot. And I know, Marla, you and Ma have had a lot of conversations about that. Like, how do you they make it so hard for you to get help for people?
Right.
My hope is that is opening up. And I think there's a whole generation of kids now, particularly artists, that are talking about what they're going through. That are on their Instagram and on their Facebook. And it's not a small thing that they have a huge audience, and they're able to say, I'm sad today, I don't feel right today. Do you feel like I feel? And I think that's so important.
Perfect example, to be totally honest. I don't know, Lalah, if you were able to take the time yesterday evening to watch the interview with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, but that was huge as well on a mental health level, because we have these ideations of people that we just feel like, if you're Donny Hathaway, that can't be the case.
Life has to be great.
If you're Lalah Hathaway, what do you mean
Right.
you're sad? If I had a voice like yours, if I could, it goes on. And so David and I were talking about that, and even in the car I was saying how blessed I feel that so many are willing to join us in these open dialects, because every conversation is really a super important conversation to have. And you do have a platform, and it brings some type of normalcy to the difference. We are very different. Right. And you brought up something about the spectrum. We're different as humans. Even if you're not off the spectrum of norm, I look at it like a ruler. There's micro measures of uniqueness within what we consider this consensus norm. Then you have people that are eccentric, and they're off either side because of their difference. And those are just the people that I realize we can't identify or relate to inside the social norm or the productive norm. And so I one of the things that I'm going to ask you, do you subscribe to or even believe that, your dad was also a musical genius?
Oh yeah.
And that part of a brain that fires in that way, it's almost like the yin and the yang. Do you see it as just the other side of a gift that's extraordinary?
It's interesting, particularly with people that are strongly gifted. You find a lot of more left brain people in that way, which is why sometimes I question those diagnoses. And I'm not a doctor. I don't have my degree, but I, again, associate with a lot of really smart, really talented, kind of deep people, and they seem mostly crazy. And I say that it's kind of a joke, but there are these eccentricities that look like what we were brought up to believe, like, oh, well, that's crazy.
Right. It's just out of the spectrum of norm. Really.
Wait, you're not anything we recognize in our consensus norm.
Right. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that, my grandfather, who was in his room all the time watching television, and who walked to mass and who walked to do his exercise, what was his diagnosis? And how did they even figure it out? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Well, first of all, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, especially about difficult subjects like this. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more with Lalah Hathaway. Marla, Dave. All right, you know what that fun music implies, Marla?
I have to do this now. because this is my shoulder's messed up.
That's
Swag.
Marla's new dance. It's time for the poll question. Last week we asked you, what is the most difficult mental illness to treat? And your options were A, depression, B, ADHD, or C, BPD. For those who are not familiar with those acronyms, what that stands for, the acronym, is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is ADHD, borderline personality disorder is BPD. And according to...
What do you think, Lay?
I think BPD by far.
Yes, and I'll give you a little insight to that.
Is that right?
That
It
is
is
correct.
absolutely correct. Part of the reason BPD may be so difficult to treat, according to the American Psychological Association, or the APA, could be that while individuals with BPD may be quick to open to a therapist, they are also that much more quick to shut down because they do not accept things are actually their fault. So everything it happens outside of them, and to them. So and when they disagree with the therapist, suddenly the therapist is the enemy. So they have a hard time being consistent with their therapy. Marla, what's the poll question for next week?
What percentage of adults with mental illness report an unmet need for treatment? 12%, 18%, or 24%?
Yes, and so we'll leave that one as a cliffhanger. Make sure you, wherever our social media is, stop by and answer the poll question when you see it. We would love to hear from you, and this is a way to get some information in a fun way.
And let us hear your voice. By doing what?
Vote.
They have to turn up their volume. Right quick, for everybody who's trying to listen and they can't hear it, I would like to make a suggestion. Turn your volume up.
That sounds simple, but we have from our producer, we checked, and it's you should be able to hear it.
They're good.
Turn up.
Awesome. Awesome.
You know what's really interesting about what you just said? About diagnoses that are hard to treat, and it makes me think about all the little children that have ever gotten spanked or punished for something that they couldn't even explain was happening. And that's on the spectrum of everything: autism, BPD, deafness. There's so many things.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I remember, now that you say that, Lalah, because our son actually has a diagnosis of schizoaffective
disorder
and bipolar 1. And because of that, we didn't realize that till much later. And had we understood at that level, we could have seen things happening a lot earlier. There was a time.
And the same, honestly, to be truthful, Monique, that's not Monique's diagnosis, but she also has mental health challenges and diagnoses on the table as well. And it was equal.
And it was a learning process for us. And what you said, we would punish for things that we considered aberrant behavior. And had we known, a matter of fact, I apologized to Monique one time. I said, had I known, I would have never handled things that way.
I would have never let you out of the room. That's it. You'd have been in there.
I didn't say that, but I wouldn't have handled
pushed
it
your
that
food
way.
under the door. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, the good thing about it is we can laugh about such a serious subject.
No, we're not. I mean, I'm that's just, I make general fodder just for a second. But the reality is what Layla's saying, we have experienced. And it is true. And it's only in retrospect when you look back and you're holding someone responsible for a behavior based on your trajectory and understanding. And that's the thing that so you almost have to forgive the parent and the parent's behavior.
So this is my thing. This is what I'm saying right now. People of color, don't beat your kids. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Because there is a genetic trauma that we are all experiencing and that we will forever all experience. Don't beat your kids. Just try not to beat them. And you might learn something.
And you know what's interesting? True. I'm going to add on to what Lay is saying, and I think we talked about this with a guest a few weeks ago. When you talk about the root of mental illness being trauma, every Black person has post-traumatic stress syndrome. Being born in this country, you've experienced trauma.
Those that don't even know they have it.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. No, I could wow you with the stories of some of my spankings. Legendary.
Same.
Yeah, I mean, when I say legendary, if I were to say it out loud, people would look at my parents differently.
they would go back. Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't tell.
Exactly. But what I will say is it's interesting that you kind of brought up the fact that a lot of creative people also seem to allow part of their creativity is to allow their mind to just go and explore places that
most of us have governors.
Most people would not go and explore.
You don't have the option because your brain doesn't open like that.
Because much like your father, our son DJ is, I say,
writer.
without exception, one of the greatest R&B writers, songwriters that I've ever encountered. That I've ever encountered.
Yeah,
that's awesome, Dave. I didn't know that.
Oh my goodness, Lay, you will. But yeah, so I mean, and because of that, you know, I wonder, is there a way that we can better handle those types of situations? I have
a bit of information that the two of you may not know that I'd like to share with Dave and Lalah. When someone displays the type of brain difference that Donnie was diagnosed with, that DJ has a similar diagnosis, in the Eastern countries, in some of them, they are considered gods. People flock to them,
or in the diaspora
for literally for advice, for healing. They literally are considered very differently than we do in the Western world. And I will say that in my journey, what I have to be honest and confess is there's a selfish intent as well in the healing, because I want you to operate within these norms. Yeah, for sure. Because I want you to be with me, and I can't relate out there. So so it's literally a responsible way to try to break through, really to contain, so we can all function and together. That's just a true confession.
Well, here's another question for you, Lay. Have you ever talked with your sister about some of these issues?
Oh yeah, we definitely have discussed it. It's interesting. Our points of view are the same but different. You know, you grow up in a house with somebody and you see things differently. I think that what's interesting is that my memory is so skewed because I have lost a lot of that time in my life before like age 12 or 13 because of all of that trauma. My sister happens to be the historian in our family, so she remembers everything.
Wow. Man, so, and I would assume that because of that, the way those experiences impacted you is slightly different as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm the first child. I think, you know what I mean? There's a lot to do with birth order and what's happening at in the house at that time and what our interests are. It's a whole lot, and I'm learning about it now, and it's fascinating.
Well, we appreciate the fact that you're shared with us that you are dealing with this in a therapeutic scene as well. So
because in our community as well, most of us have a negative view. The minute you say there, I'm not, you know, and it's so necessary for us all.
Absolutely. Layla's one of the greatest singers. She said that she studies with a vocal coach. You know what I mean? She could be a vocal and probably has vocal coached others, but she still goes and seeks professional help to expand her own knowledge. And that's the thing that we all have to do.
It took me a while to get here. It took me a while to get here. I definitely, you know, I have a strong tribe of strong women. I have a lot of alpha chick friends that I go to when I need it. And I'm able to bounce my ideas and learn about this and that and all of that. But really, to actually submit to, in the same way that when Marla broke my ankle.
Okay, right, hold right there, Lalah. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. More with Lalah in a minute.
Worthless.
Don't trust them. They'll hurt you. You're worthless.
It's pointless.
When the pain of schizophrenia meets hope, everything can change. Help someone who is struggling by supporting the National Alliance on Mental Illness and be a part of the NAMI effect. Hope starts with you.
It's raw, real, and unfiltered.
Time always flies when you're having this much fun. Lalah, we appreciate you and the efforts that you have helped us in breaking the silence and erasing the stigma that surrounds mental health, and being willing to talk openly about some really serious issues that you deal with, and to kind of normalize the need to seek help. I'm starting with my new therapist next week. And
you are?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And I think Marla's trying to give us a hint that she is...
I silenced myself, but I couldn't take it for long.
She
I have to open up my speak hole. So I could,
Lord.
But Marla, tell us about the mask that you wear.
Well, these masks this is Mask for Mental Health, and Layla's also been a recipient, and my mom custom makes each of these masks. But this one is special because it says, mask it or casket. So we encourage everybody to continue to stay safe. Wear your
Where can
mask.
I get those? Because I got those for almost all my friends for Christmas, and they love them.
LovingBeyondReason.org.
and hit the button that says Mask for the number 4 Mental Health. It's right there on the bar. Very
Lalah,
simple.
before we leave, give us one nugget of encouragement when it comes to mental health and how music can literally help us get through some of those tough moments.
Be gentle with yourself. I'm super hard on myself, and I think a lot of people are hard on themselves, but I have time in the day where I listen to music, and it is a healer. It is, again, like that best friend in the room. When I die, on the day I die, I'll have to say goodbye to music, just like all the rest of my friends. So find that music that soothes you, and have a moment and just sit down and breathe, and be gentle with yourself.
I love it.
We appreciate it. We love you, and we appreciate you hanging around. We'll see you. Layla's going to join us for 2 episodes, so
we'll see you again next week.
Bye. Bye,
see you
Lalah.
guys later. See you next week.
Layla, your doll needs clothes, sweetie. This is not what this show is.
She likes to have no clothes on.
I understand, Layla. She's not ready for her cameo appearance, though.
She is. Look at her hair.
This has been Mental Health Monday. See you guys next week.
Bye.